Yeah.
The earwigs would freak me out. Like, I have this fear of getting an earwig in my ear and it pinching my eardrum. Like, that's a real fear of mine. Like, so like I used to sleep sometimes as a kid with my hand over my ears because I would think an earwig was going
Like
to
you
get, or a
could just
spider.
use them like plugs or something,
Yeah.
or put cotton in your hair or something.
I was super paranoid. Like, what were your, do you have any paranoias? Like,
I was
mine
kid.
was like a bug getting in my ear.
Yeah, I would have freaked out about that. And then I just remember like I used to have nightmares that there was going to be an alligator come to our house. We live nowhere near where there's going to be an alligator. Like somebody'd have to drop it off. But I think it was just probably from like watching Peter Pan or,
Yeah.
watching some sort of movie that, had alligators in it. I don't know. But yeah, I remember that. And I'm like, why was I afraid of alligators?
You know,
That was
Richard is definitely afraid of frogs.
Oh,
Like, his
really?
thing is frogs. Well,
I don't want
frogs
to
and
touch them.
snakes,
I'm not as
but
scared of
like
them.
the snakes, okay, that's normal. People be scared of, snakes, but the frogs, he's really scared of
No,
frogs.
yeah, I mean, I don't mind frogs. I just don't want to touch them, and I don't like anything that's too crawly. Um, and I don't like snakes. No,
Yeah. See,
don't
I
want to have.
don't mind. Okay, I am scared of snakes, but I don't mind snakes, if that makes sense. Like, because we have them around here, like black racer snakes. I have this really funny video of it was when we were redoing this building, this little office, this little cottage, I like to call it. So Marinus was helping me, and Luna Moon starts barking at something, and I knew she was barking at a snake because she does a certain cadence when she has an animal trap. She's a German Shorthair Pointer, so anyway, so she's doing the thing. So I am, like I said, I don't mind snakes, but I'm scared of snakes. So I'm like, Marinus, you got to go get the snake. So she's trying to get Luna Moon away from the snake, and we're trying to get the snake just to go. We don't want to kill the snake. I don't want to kill the
Right,
snake.
right.
So I'm like, just get it to go. So she takes this big, and I have a video of this. It's the funniest thing. So she takes what are those, like from the soffit, where the rain comes down
Oh
and the
yeah,
thing.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So there's a big chunk hanging because it fell off, last rain or whatever. So she grabs it and she throws it at the snake. And I'm like, don't hurt him. Like, we're just trying to get him to go.
She's
So
all
it's one of my
they're just
favorite
throwing
videos to
something
watch.
at me.
Don't hurt him.
Yeah, I wouldn't want that. I mean, we don't really have rattlesnakes here, but every once in a while I hear that people have run across one, and so that's not completely out of the norm, but it's not desert-y enough
Yeah.
to have that.
Yeah, we
So,
have
but
coral
but
snakes. We have rat snakes. So I went down to the beach and I looked down before I went to go down the little walkie thing. And I see this big snake and I'm like, I'm not going down there. So I'm like, please move. Please just move. Please just move. But so it moves. It was eating something. So it moved. And then even though I just ran past it. It's like,
right,
still running. What if it, like, in my mind, these are the other things. Like, if I see something like that, I think it's going to like attach to my leg and pull me under, or like the things that go on in my
yeah,
mind. When I see this
right,
stuff, like, I tell Richard, he's like, I knew that's what you were thinking. Like, that would never
right.
happen in a million years. But for some reason, my brain.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, weird stuff like that. I mean, and it's weird how your brain can kind of go in that direction, and you're like, how did I suddenly start thinking that, you know? Well, because you remember, like, I don't know, like there's like urban legends of like people getting bit by
Yes, or
something
like
in the
the
toilet. They go into a
strangest deaths or
restaurant, they
something
use a
like that.
toilet,
Weird ways to die.
yeah. And I'm like, why did I? And I try not to look at stuff like that now because I'm like, I don't. I'm susceptible to, that trauma. I don't need
Right.
it. I know my brain will run with that.
Yeah, it's like, what if this happens and then that happens? Which, it's like the chance is 1,000,000,000 to 1 that something like that would happen. But I'm like, could happen to me or to you
Right.
based on the way our minds think.
Oh, I know. I know Kevin just sent me this thing about ADHD and like, we can't, like the symptoms of things that you do if you have ADHD and then how it's sort of like counterproductive to what you're trying to do and all this stuff. And I'm like, I know this, you know. So thank you.
We talked about kind of like remapping, right? So I think, or something happens this way, but I always do what could have happened was, and then go through.
Right.
I try to use it in good ways too, like think about, positive things and versus,
worst case scenario. I think
yeah,
that's true. I think I do that too, where you kind of think about the whole line of succession of what could happen. It's sort of like the domino. Like if the dominoes fall this way, it's going to have this effect.
yeah,
But if it doesn't fall, then, and some people are like, but it never happened. You're like, yeah, but you have to be prepared in case it
right,
does.
yeah.
Right.
But I think that goes to being good dot connectors,
Yeah.
so it's a crazy thing when it's happening on, the snake could wrap around my leg and pull me under these bushes when I'm the next meal or whatever it is. But, when you're thinking about what we do, it does help.
Right.
Like it's because your mind is thinking a different way and thinking ahead
Right.
to say these 10 things could happen. So,
Yeah. And it's like, I think people sometimes would think that's sort of being negative or throwing water on the fire. You know what I mean? Like sort of
yeah.
dampening spirits. And I don't think that's it. I think it's more like, you really need to kind of poke holes in things. You really have
Hmm.
to kind of, stress test it and see if it's going to work. And, if you can do some of that up front before you completely build something and account for contingencies, I think that's ideal, right? I mean, it's not always possible, but where it is possible, I think, you know, we would
Yeah.
all do better to do that more, you
I
know?
agree. And it's not like, because sometimes I would start to feel like the naysayer, the negative Nancy, they call it. I'm sorry for all the Nancy's out there. But, like, and you start to think that, like, oh, I may not want to speak up because I might get taken as I don't like the idea, which I love the idea, but I see some things that we got to be thinking through. So it kind of,
Right,
creates this also when you do think like that and people start to say, oh, you sound real negative. And you're like, no, that's not my intention at all. Like, you
right.
stop speaking up. You start to be quiet, and then, things falter. You're like, "I saw that coming." I could have said that, but you didn't wanna
I
be at
told
the
you, you
same
hate to be
time,
like, I told you so, but you have, but I think that speaks to, the culture and
Yeah.
of an organization and what you can expect. And I think that that's very true in that if you become the naysayer, people are going to be like, oh, we don't want to run this idea by Jennifer because she's just going to naysay it. And
Mhm.
that's not really what you should be doing. Like you can't just, and I know we've been part of organizations who are always after the next shiny thing, right? Like they're like, like it's just working with a bunch of cats. They're just running around looking at all the shiny things. And it's like, well, sometimes you have to actually, do the work and go through it and figure it out and all that.
Yeah, and then
So,
sometimes the shiny thing, right? But then the way that I kinda put it metaphorically is I said this to, my old mentor, Gene, at one point, and I said, "It's almost like, you know, you get to this stage of evolution, right? And it becomes this beautiful butterfly. It's like everything's working, everything is in sync. You have these lovely processes happening, right? Businesses coming, we're servicing it in the right way and things like that. And then someone comes and says, can we do this cheaper? Can we do this in different ways, right? And then all of a sudden you start to shift what was successful. You should always find efficiencies and do those things, but you start to fundamentally change kind of the delivery of that. And then it starts to crumble and fall apart. I'm like, oh, here went the beautiful butterfly. We're going to have to rebuild it again. But there's this cycle that happens too. I feel like, kind of within that, with going after the next shiny thing, sometimes you need to redo what's already working, or maybe they do it just because, and you don't always need to do that. I don't know. That's kind of what I've seen. Like, and if I think about our cycles and things like that, like I just see it in different places where you get it to this beautiful place, and then it's like, oh, well, let's pick it apart now.
let's pull off its wings.
Yeah, let's
Yeah.
see if it still flies.
Yeah. No, I agree because it's, and the butterfly, you can't touch it or if it's going to not be able to fly anymore, so, but you have to, I don't know where I was going with that, but anyway, the, I think we decided we are going to talk about culture on this, episode and all that means because I see it so much in job descriptions and people
Mm-hmm.
talk about it a lot. And, this culture of, is sort of the kind of everybody sort of marching orders in terms of a company. And, our HR and recruiting are tasked with finding people that sort of, mesh into the culture. But I don't know that anybody ever really defines what that means. I mean, or they think they
Yeah.
do, but then we actually try to start describing it. And it's kind of elusive because it's almost like trying to describe a color to somebody who's blind, right? Like you
Yeah.
can't,
And you can mean
how
so
do
many things
you
by
explain,
culture, to your point, you know?
right? And so if you try to explain it, and it is one of those things that is a little bit elusive. You can't always put your finger on it. I think people have tried oh, well, we'll have ping pong tables and we'll do this when that's our culture and everything. It's like, yeah, but that's just stuff. That's not culture.
I do love
That's
me a good pizza party. People always make
more
fun of
in your
those.
bone.
I like them.
Well, I'm not saying that they're bad. I'm
No,
just
no,
saying
no.
it's
I
not a
know.
culture, right?
Yeah.
And so,
But that's not
pizza
culture. Well,
parties
kind of
are not
is.
culture.
Yeah. So if you
Yeah.
think about companies who like feed you all the time, that is part of the culture. Like, yeah, I'm excited to talk in this episode about like all of the things that culture means and how you can define that and what that looks like. So, yeah.
Yeah, because if you talk about culture, I think a lot of times people associate it with, like, if you think about it, like if you're Italian, right? So if Italian food and certain recipes are part of your culture. So people, I think, can tend to go that route when they think about culture of like it's very specific sort of, things, or maybe it's the
Hmm.
way you dress, or maybe it's, the holidays you celebrate or whatever. Families can have their own culture of like, this is the stuff we do. So it's really specific and it's also incredibly broad at the same
Well, it
time.
really is. And I have a good example based on the example you gave, right? So, Italian, different regions of Italy, Siciliano, right? So, if you go to
Like
Sicily, it's going to be in
different
my Sicilian
parents and
family, it's going to look different than the other regions within Italy and things
sure.
like that. So, just even within that very specific, you even start to dive down even more. So, what does it
Right.
mean to the very granular level?
Right. And so I think I don't really understand how any company can really define it if it's more than just a couple of people. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Because it's not a family. It's not it's not a nationality. It's not like yeah, if we're all living in the United States, then we're all Americans, and there's certain things that come along with being a part of a country and nationality. But I think, yeah, it's what I struggle with, but I just really trip over that a lot when I see people saying, well, our culture is, and we want to find people who mesh with our culture. What does that really mean? Is it because they look like you? Is it because they sound like you? They live where you live? They went to the same school as you? Like, how are you looking at somebody and reflecting that this is part of the culture? Because especially when you're just interviewing somebody, you're not seeing what they ate for lunch or how they spend their day, their time with their families. So I think sometimes, people are like, oh, I like to work out or do this, whatever. And then that becomes part of the culture. Like you know what I mean? Like
Yeah, because that's
those
not
are
culture
people
to
do.
me, like at all. Like when you
No,
think about these are things
no,
that those are hobbies in my, but you start to
right.
see
Or
that where
it's
people
just fitness.
gravitate to like people. Oh, they like this.
Right.
I like that
Right.
too. So that becomes essentially, or people hire that way. Oh, I like these things. These people like these things. So it
Because
becomes
if you
sort of
think about
your inner culture.
Yeah,
So
because if you
yeah.
think about people dating, like you may find out, oh, this is, what their birthday is, their favorite color, their favorite ice cream, whatever. These are just facts about them, but they don't really speak to who they are fundamentally.
Hmm.
I mean, I've seen people who made their entire personality about the color purple or whatever, like
I love when people
everything's
do quirky
purple.
stuff like that, but that's the
Yeah. And
personality,
so
right? That's not culture. That's personality.
exactly. But exactly, it's not a culture. So how do you define it? And I really struggle with that of like, I don't think you can. I think people would argue that you can because it's sort of driven by the CEO and whatever their culture looks like to them or what kind of organization they want to have.
Yeah.
But when you actually start working in an organization and taking part in meetings and being part of decision making and maybe making it through layoffs and stuff, I think the culture ends up being this culture of crisis in a way, like you're
Yeah.
constantly in survival mode because you don't want to ruffle feathers. You don't want to piss anybody off. You don't want to, sure, I'll take the extra work because I want to get a raise this year. And, like there's all these things that become, maybe you don't even realize it, but they become part of your behavior in your workplace because the culture is now dictated by the earnings report
Yeah, like
or
we
the
talked about
board's
this.
decision.
I think was it last
Yeah.
episode where we kind of talked about like, the time off thing and no one else is taking time off. So can I take time off? Right. And what is that? And creating that is sort of a culture when you think about it. And to your point, that crisis culture or the hustle culture. I just saw a post earlier today about hustle culture. Like what I
Yeah.
think when I think about driving business results and I think about what everybody can kind of gravitate towards and really think about. So you have diversity as culture, you have all of those things, right? But one of the last things when we are Clover, you'll remember this, that we had to change the culture of the recruiting team. And there was not a culture of question. You couldn't ask questions. You couldn't ask the why, things like that. So that was the very first thing. And I said, question me. And I would do the rapid fire. Remember at the end of the
Oh,
things
those are
where
brilliant. I loved
answer
listening to
every
that because
question. Like, I think you got to get to
some
a
of those
place
questions
where,
are hard too.
yeah,
Like they put you on the spot sometimes and you're like, well, this is what it is. And you didn't know what was coming up in the
yeah.
feed.
I was like, oh, do I have to answer that? But I did it. I said I would read every single one. So I think when you think about like companies and the fundamental culture, right? I think that's, are you a relatively flat organization? Can you get to decisions? Are you allowing people to ask, questions, culture of question
Mm.
types, things like that? So I don't know, but, and I see other people are defining it so many different ways, which may or may not be right or wrong. Like when you look at different cultures and how people fit in, I don't know. I know you've done like a couple of assessments on, culture assessment coming into somewhere. And I've done a couple of them too. Like, how do you feel about, when someone does the assessment of to say, do you fit the culture? And we won't even talk to you unless you
I
fit
don't
the
really
culture.
understand. I don't understand how, and I remember we had to do this for a company once. We had to kind of create an assessment way back in the day when we were at Orbital. I don't know if you remember that, but we had to kind of come up and we had to weight the questions and answers and everything.
I remember this. Yeah, it's kind of coming back to
Yeah.
me. Yeah.
And so I kind of remember like we kind of just had to figure out like what, and maybe we looked at some that were out there, but we had to kind of create one that could be used. And, I know there's companies that do this now. Maybe we didn't have access to that at the time, but what is it based on? I know that there can be a lot of psychology that goes into these. And like they have tests for everything. Like there's a psychopath test.
I am not
If you
taking that.
no, but if you answer certain questions in certain ways, it can mean that you're fit a certain personality. But if you say that somebody is a psychopath, as an example, you automatically assume they're a serial killer, which not all
No,
psychopaths are serial
yeah, those
killers,
are,
but
yeah, I think it's
most.
like, it can come out in many different ways.
Yeah,
It's,
yeah, yeah, yeah. So like, I was trying to explain this to Kevin once, where it was like, psychopaths are not all serial killers, but also serial killers are usually psychopaths.
right. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a fundamental trait of a certain type of behavior, but it's not, it's sort of how you're raised. It's how you deal with your emotions and blah, blah, blah. So there's a lot of factors. So I think that's part of it is that they're trying to create ways to help filter through people because I think ultimately it comes down to that thing we talked about a couple episodes ago of people not being able to make decisions on hiring.
Yeah.
They're like, they can't trust their gut to say, well, this person meets all the criteria and I like them and they seem to be a good fit for the job. Well, let's go ahead and give them a psychological analysis to make sure. Why don't we trust ourselves more? Why don't we trust that we're actually able to determine if somebody's going to be a good fit for the company? And if you're not 100% sure, have another person interview them or a couple people, whatever. But and first of all, set that up in the beginning. Don't decide that at the 11th hour, but
Yeah.
that you're going to do that. But my point is that I think it's all that we keep adding these layers of ways to sort of sort people out of the
Yeah.
process when we should be sorting people in to the
Yeah.
process. And I, because when you do those types of tests, I'm sure there's certain ways you can answer questions that are probably going to be more indicative. Like I was telling Kevin about, we were talking about this actually recently. because I remember doing one years and years ago. And I remember this is the only question I really remember on the questionnaire, but it was like, I've never had too much to drink in my life. And you had to say yes, no, and maybe there was like
Was it like
like
always,
1, 2.
sometimes,
Right.
never?
Yeah. I don't remember how
Right.
you answered it, but that question stuck with me because I was like, there's no good way to answer this question. Because if you say never, I've never had too much to drink in my life, they're going to think you're a liar. Right. And if you say, yes, I have had too much to drink in my life, well, you're an alcoholic, so you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. So like, how do you, and I mean, you want to be truthful, right? I mean, you want to be, but then if you answer, no, I've never had too much to drink, and then you're on the job and you're out with your colleagues, on a Friday night or whatever, or the Christmas party, and you have
Right.
too much to drink, is the person who gave
You
you that
fall into the
assessment going to be
tree.
like, I don't,
Yeah.
or if you talk
They
about
didn't
this
answer
time
that. Who has
without
access
really,
to these things too? Like, at the same time,
right.
I've self-sabotaged myself on an assessment recently, by the way. So I still had a little bit of PTSD, from previous in that environment and the culture and things like that. So had a little bit of PTSD, and I'm sent this assessment. I took it, the first one, but then I don't know what the results of that one were, but I think I self-sabotaged too. I think I did that too. And then they sent me the second one, which had the unicorn on it. The one that I sent you that said, oh, this is the current, assessment that they're giving and things like that. But when I looked at it, okay, so it was pictures. Like, you choose this or you choose that. And it's just pictures. It's not words. It's not anything else. So
It's
it
like
was
a
like
roar.
someone being frustrated, like really money, money, money. And then the other person was like reading, you know? So I'm taking this test for a business. So
Oh,
I'm
because then they're
thinking,
like, we want to know that they're hungry to work and some
yes.
money is driver. Well, I mean, your
And I'm
driver
like,
for
that's
work
not my driver
anyway
right
is
now,
over.
you know?
Right. Well, and yeah, most people, I mean, there's very few people who work and they don't have to,
Yeah.
right? Like, most people are working because they need a paycheck. So yes, they're driven by for financial reasons, but at the same time, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're like cutthroat about it
Right, but I
either.
want the, reading on the mountain life. I don't want to live on the mountain like we talked about earlier, but so I chose the one
Right.
of how I'd like my state to be. It didn't mean that I don't want to make a company money. It didn't mean that I don't want to drive results. It didn't mean, but based on this assessment that I self-sabotaged, I knew better. I know how to take these things. I've been around the block a time or two, but I still
Well,
had a
even
little
if
bit
you
of PTSD.
answer
I
in
was
a
like,
way
I
that's not
don't want anything that looks like that because I don't want to feel like that again. You know what I mean?
well, and it's not like you can explain it either. Like, I'm
Right.
choosing reading because I love to read and I have high goals for how many books I read or
Right.
whatever. My first love was to become a librarian. I don't know. Like, there's no way to, ever answer that in a way that you can. And that's the thing that I'm getting at is just like, how do you weight these things in a way that you can account for all these different variables? Because people are
Yeah.
not black and white. They're not that cut and dry,
No.
you
I
know?
mean, we're so dynamic as people, right? So this side of me. So
Right.
I guess when you take them, this is for all the candidates that are out there that are going to take an assessment on culture and personality and things like that. Who should you be at work? It tells you, like to bring in who you are. But I mean, if
Mm-mm.
you look at what the company culture, what they say their culture is, right? We're family oriented. We're whatever that is, whatever that looks like. And then when you sit down
We're
and you take this
inclusive.
assessment, who do they want you to be at work? And that's how you, like, people are going to get mad for probably me saying this out loud. But I mean, you can really, if you're thinking about it differently, like I did, I sabotaged myself, Danielle. I really did self-sabotage. It was, I was like, I knew
Yeah.
better. When I saw my result, I'm like, this isn't really me at work.
No.
You know what I mean? Like,
Sure.
but it didn't pull in,
Well,
like
and
it
that's
said
the
I
thing.
wasn't
It's
like
like, yeah,
leadership qualities. I didn't have any.
yeah, because it's like we want to know who you really are at work. We
Right.
don't want to know who you are at home or with your kids or with your significant other. We want to
Mhm.
know how you are at work and what we can get out of you.
Yeah.
I mean, because and I feel like we've talked about this in so many different ways of like a company saying, well, we think you'd get bored in 6 months.
Yeah.
Who are you? How do you know? You don't know me.
Maybe.
You don't know my life. You don't know what I'm doing. Like, you may know my work life and
Mhm.
what I've told you, what's on a resume and all these things. But it's so counterproductive, and I think companies get sold on this idea because their company's selling this. they're selling this idea. Oh, put it in your budget and you're going to have better retention. You're going to make better hiring decisions. First of all, how do you even measure that?
Yeah.
How do you even
But
measure?
sometimes, like, if someone is, like, very opposite, like, their integrity and things like that, and that's kind of part of the assessment, I feel like the integrity piece of it, like, is really,
Sure.
that's who you are innately. So if someone were to, like, if you're doing something taking, intake on integrity, all right, I kind of see that, right? When you think
Sure.
about it screening someone in or out, like, it's okay to steal 5 apples if you have 100. Well, no, it's not, Johnny. Put that
Oh,
apple back,
right.
you know?
Right. Because there's that old, sort of question of, guy owns a business and he sees his worker takes $5, right, out of the till and he fires her. And, people are like, why did she, she'd been there for 20 years and been a great employee and friend of the family, whatever. And it's like, well, because she sold $5 means that she's probably stolen more. Right. So you're right. There is that integrity piece. But at the same time, it's just, I think that my point is that it's so much more broad than that. Sure,
It
there are
is.
questions like that you could ask. But anyway, I don't know what
Yeah.
I was
Can
going to
I
say.
tell you my saddest integrity story that someone got fired over? So it was when I was working at the Golden Line. It was previous, it was the very first company in that, chain of companies. So I helped out in employee relations. So I was an executive secretary. I would go help in HR and help out all the different businesses. So employment and employee services and employee relations was not my thing, but I would have to cover. And remember I told you I did the shorthand class so I could take the notes, the union notes, and when he had union
Yeah.
meetings and grievances and things like that. And I would get to read all the files and see this man had worked for them for kind of was over 20 years. It was a really long time. And he was a slot porter. So back in the day, right? I'm talking early 2000s, not late 90s type thing. So they had the slot porters where you would come when the change cashed out. They would, sweep the machines and whatever else. Well, he was cleaning and there was a quarter in there. So he puts the quarter in his pocket as he's cleaning. This man has turned in other stuff and everything else, throughout the years. Puts the quarter in his pocket. The camera sees him putting the
Got it.
quarter in the pocket, right? That was
Yeah.
theft. He got fired over 25 cents. The union could even help with that because it was theft.
I
So,
may have
when you
been.
think about like that integrity, like that was an oops. My stepmom used to call them fops. So she worked at Walmart and like she worked in cosmetics. And you know how when you're working in Walmart, because I worked at Walmart for a little bit, for a few years, 16 to I think it was 18 or 19. So when you are cleaning up in cosmetics or whatever, you stick stuff in your pocket and then, I'll put it back,
Right.
when you go into the next aisle or whatever. Sometimes you do it. So she'd bring it home. She's like, I got another fop. Do you want it?
Well, yeah,
She
I
should
mean, and
probably bring it
that's
back. But you know
true.
what I
Like,
mean? Like things happen
yeah, because I
and,
worked in retail,
yeah.
and a lot of times you're trying to do something or help somebody, and you finally like pick something up, or you need to put something back, or whatever. And if you work at a place that has like a drugstore that I don't see people wear these anymore, but it used to be back in the day, like drugstores usually had like some sort of apron on,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Yeah, like the
So
apron. Yeah, that's exactly what we had, like the smock. It was called the
yeah, the smock.
yeah, that smock.
And so the smock would be helpful because you could stick stuff in there, and you might stick stuff in there that you were going to use as part of your job, like maybe a pen or a calculator
Mm-hmm.
before everybody there's on their phones or whatever. And so, or a key to something that like maybe it was a case that they had perfume in or whatever. But yeah, like you would pick, and I mean, I remember when I worked in retail, I worked in clothing, and I'd end up with all kinds of weird, like, things that come on garments when you are unpacking them. They
Mm-hmm.
used to have so much crap that came on, like it's in plastic, and then there's like tissue in the middle, and then they would have like little, plastic doohickeys to hold it folded, and all these things, and so you constantly had stuff like that everywhere. So a lot of times, you'd pick that kind of. So it's a lot of times I come home and I'm emptying my pockets of
Yeah,
that kind of junk.
but you didn't have
It's literally
fops
just
found
junk.
on floor. You didn't have the
Right,
fops.
right. Yeah, off. But yeah, like, so I get that, but I think, yeah, it's a complicated thing, I guess. But and I
Mm-hmm.
guess if you're trying to weed out integrity and potential theft and stuff like that, but that's a different thing. Those are for different types of jobs. So maybe if it's more financial, um, you know, I don't know. I
And
really
stealing
don't.
company time, that can be considered that. You know what I mean? If you're, you're paid whatever and you're only working 10 hours or you have another job. We've caught people doing that. But I mean, you can't culturally assess that. Like the assessments
Yeah, no,
necessarily wouldn't, show you that type of thing. But,
right. That's true. Yeah, but I don't know. It's really complicated because how do you, but I don't know how those types of assessments fold people into a specific type of culture,
yeah. Remember
unless
we did the
finding,
assessment with at Orbital that we helped build for
yeah,
I don't remember what we called the company, but when we were working with that company and you told the story about the invoices, we had helped them build with one of the guys on the team, our corporate team, put in an assessment. If I remember right, so let's see how good my memory is. It was integrity. It was, like ownership of, basically the company, just acting like an owner is what I want to say. I
yeah,
can't remember what else, but there was the weighting in there, and then it was like an automated assessment where they had the dial buttons where they would choose from one of the others. But yeah, they used it when to bring people in. Towards the end,
so
though, as it was the
pretty
store.
there,
Remember,
which
it was
is
for
so
the stores, the
funny
retail. It wasn't even for the corporate employees. It was for the
because they
store
didn't go to
retail.
the corporate people.
Yeah.
No, they didn't care about that because there was no integrity happening in the.
Well, anyhow.
Well, there was some, but a lot of the people we worked with, there wasn't a lot of.
Yeah. So
You know,
Harvard Business Review, this is November, December. And we talked about this a little bit. And I was like, well, let me bring this in because I knew we were talking about culture in the office. And I thought this would be another good thing to talk about. But it says, we're still lonely at work. It's time for companies to take a different approach to culture. And then one of the bullets, the large bullet says, we also found that whether someone works 5 days in the office or just 2 days in the office makes no difference when it comes to the level of loneliness. When I read that, I started thinking about the companies that we've worked for. In one of the cultures that I loved, there's different pieces in each one that I feel like that we've been at that I've liked or maybe haven't liked. But the one that it made me think about is Orbital. In that culture on the talent team, I'm just going to, I almost said the actual name out loud. Everyone would know what that was. But anyways, on the talent team, we didn't do video. We were all voice. We had great conversations. We really knew each other. We took care of each other. Like,
yeah,
we checked in on each other. I remember just someone knew in my voice something was going on. And like, I all of a sudden
right,
received flowers. I don't expect flowers all the time, but it was just like, that was
right,
such a great culture. And
yeah,
you never felt lonely. And we were 100% remote. Like, I don't
right.
ever remember feeling lonely working in that culture. So what's changed?
No, and I think you're right because I think when you're in person, CEOs and executives will say, "Oh, we need people to be in the office to be more productive." Well, maybe you can squeeze a little bit more out of people on a daily basis, but like when you have to drive to an office and you have to get dressed up or whatever. But I think if you're able to, one of the things that I remember and I struggled with initially when I joined that team and I was virtual and we were just on calls is like getting ready for work, right?
Mm.
Like, accustomed to getting up, showering, doing the thing, da da da. And it's such a relief when you don't have to do all that, and you can just go and do your work and you can not have to worry about what your hair looks like or whatever. And so I think that's part of it. And I think when you can only hear somebody's voice and you do get to notice the nuances of what people are saying.
Yeah.
And you also kind of have to take them at their word. Like you really have to kind of, listen to them, listen to what they're saying, what they're telling you, because you don't have facial features to comment on. You're not judging people on what they look like. You're not judging people on what they're wearing or the
What
kind
about
of
the
car.
loneliness quotient to that? Like it's saying that people are more lonely now than ever. And we have more connectivity than ever when I think about
Right.
it. Like, is it
Connection
because
is
the
not,
cultures are conditioning people just to show up, do your job, or have people changed their mindset to say, I'm just going to work to do my job. I'm not building relationships. I'm not fostering that. Or, there's a culture where maybe it's the quote unquote nice culture, but it's passive aggressive. So I keep to myself. What is driving the loneliness at work? Because I've always had Worksties, right? Like, so we've had a Workstie, but you build relationships, you create different Worksties as you go to different companies. And I've met some
I
great
think it
people
comes
along the
down.
path that I could not live without. So why is
I
that
think
not happening anymore?
if you trust the people you work with on a fundamental level, not just
Hmm.
that they're gonna, that they're gonna show up every day, because that's part of it. Like, I've worked in places where there was only a few people, and if one person called out one day, you're kind of left holding the bag and trying to pick up the slack. But, so there's that. If you feel like they're not going to talk badly about you behind their back, or if you disclose something, they're not going to run and tell somebody else or the boss. So there's a whole level of trust there that I think if you don't feel that, if you don't feel like, you're kind of all in this together and you're going to make it work together, you can't. And I think people get paranoid about making jokes or talking about stuff that's in the news, because our news is so filled with political stuff.
I'm so tired of all the political stuff. I just want to
Well,
take
I
a nap
know.
on
And
it
it's
all.
like,
I want to snooze it all. I don't want to
right.
hear
Well,
it
and that's
anymore.
the thing. It's like, but that's, people are like, oh, there's so much more. But no, I think it's just that we're getting more of that. It's not that there's more. Well, there probably is more news right now, but we're also ingesting it in different ways. Like,
Yeah, because you get it from every angle, right? When I
yeah,
think
if
about
you
that,
log
like
on
you're
to
getting it
Facebook,
on social,
get
you're
it.
getting it on if you turn on the
It's on
TV, you're getting it
LinkedIn.
on
You-
LinkedIn, you're getting it like LinkedIn was the one sacred place without
I know.
politics, and now that's changed. Can we please bring it back to no
Right.
politics, like just
But
business?
there's a lot of things that are
It does impact
happening,
business in some ways, right? When you think about it, but
right? Because it
yeah,
does happen to reflect on how people are going to hire and all
yeah,
that kind of stuff.
that stuff's
So
important and should be there,
yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah,
I feel
I
like,
get
but
that.
not like the other stuff.
Right. So I
I'll
think,
say,
yeah, there's that. And then, like, I'm always getting alerts on my phone for different things, and I've got to go in and like change some of my alert settings because I don't need to see every single one. But I think that's true. Like, you're getting it in your normal life. If you watch the news or if you watch YouTube or whatever, there's certain amounts of things that are just going to pass your news feed.
yeah.
You log into Facebook, if you logged into, what LinkedIn, whatever, and then it might get alerts, or maybe you have family members who are going to text you. And, if it was 20 years ago, people weren't using text as much. It was more, limited. So you might not ever hear somebody's opinion about something because, you know, Facebook didn't exist, LinkedIn didn't exist
Mhm.
yet. You actually had to talk to somebody on the phone to get their opinion about something.
Yeah,
You know what I
that's so
mean?
true.
So it's like this stuff is happening, and it always has been, but it was just really how you ingest that information. So you have to kind of make a concerted effort to keep some of that out. And I think
Well, to your
when people talk about, what's going on in the news, they're talking
yeah,
about politics. It's overtaking everything.
yeah, and I think that maybe that's what's driving some of the, feeling lonely. Like you're afraid if you say kind of the way you
Yeah,
feel,
that's
or like that could be held against you if someone doesn't believe the same thing, or you know what I mean, or how they're looking at things versus having a good conversation and healthy about it and doing those things instead, people are starting to shut in. So you said a key thing to me in culture, which is trust, right? And I
yeah,
feel like that goes into every single thing we're talking about. So can you share your opinion? Can you just be yourself when you're at work? Can you have conversations, right? So can you trust that people have your back and you're working together on the team and you're just, going to the greater good, right? And focusing on the greater good. I think it comes down to trust, like the culture, the feeling lonely, the everything else. It comes down to trust and trusting how you can show up as yourself and be yourself. And, there's some things you don't want people to bring to work, but you know what I
right.
mean?
And
Like,
I think that's a nuance in and of itself too,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
I think that's why people get really excited to do like fantasy football and, all that kind of stuff, because it's a way to interact with people. I
Mhm.
mean, I've never done it, but
Oh, it's
I
fun.
think,
I used to do it all the time. I have not done it in a few years, but
oh, I know,
yeah.
but I get
I
the why
still
people
owe
do
someone a
it.
jersey, I think. I think I never sent it to her. Whoops. Sorry. I'll get that to you.
But yeah, like, you might have, when you work in an office, you may be just eating your lunch at your desk,
Yeah.
or, people kind of scatter. And so they don't, people are running errands or whatever. So you're not spending a lunch hour with people. Whereas, it's just, but I think that also applies working remotely. And I think sometimes when you work remotely, you make more effort to actually get to know people. Like
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
I would like, get on a call with somebody and be like, how are you doing? Actually try to make some exchange with them of like, oh, hey, I like your top, or, your hair looks really good today, or, whatever, just to kind of be a human in
Mm-hmm.
that respect. I remember years ago, I was working for somebody who had taken over a role, and we were both living on opposite sides of the country. He liked to get on this like conference line, and he would just sit there, like he'd have it open and you could call in if you wanted to, which was really weird to me. But like, we'd have our calls, and then I remember I might not have talked to him for like a week or whatever, right? And so I would get on the phone and I'd be like, "How's it going?" And like he had such a hard time with just small greetings of like, "Oh hey, good to talk to you. How's it going?" Whatever. He would just immediately start talking about work stuff. And I was like, I haven't talked to you in like 2 weeks. Why are you like, that's to me, that was really off putting because I felt like it was dismissing me as a human in a weird
Yeah.
way. And so, I mean, like if we had been talking earlier that day, then that wouldn't bother me. But like, I think we're kind of programmed as humans to sort of, you know, be nice and polite and friendly. And I remember like telling somebody about that and they were like, yeah, that's true. Like it's like you don't care about how I'm doing. You
Yeah.
just want to talk work stuff.
Maybe he didn't know how to make small. I used to be really bad at the small, like the weather thing and the what, you get the, because I was really bad at the small talk, but I made a rule. And this is one of my favorite rules. I'm sticking with it as long as I am around people and as long as I shall live. And it is when we go to dinner, the after hours, if we're going somewhere to eat and we're happy, whatever it is type thing, we're going to eat. I refuse. I refuse to talk about work. You are not talking to me about work decisions. I want to hear about life. What's going on? What's happening? Like, yeah,
Right.
let's just talk and connect and just enjoy each other's company. Like, I will allow for just a few minutes of work talk if there's something you want to get out. But you know what I mean? Like, my rule is, and you might weave some things in there naturally, but have you ever like sat with that person at a dinner that all they want to do is talk about work? And you're like, I just need a break for like 5 minutes.
Right. Right.
Just want a break, please.
True. That's
Yeah.
true. Well, and I think too, like, maybe when, especially like when we were younger, maybe the people that we were working with were more around the same socioeconomic, thing,
Mm-hmm.
not thing, but like in the same space. So I wonder if too, people are having a hard time or feeling more lonely at work because they don't feel like they can relate to people. Like a lot
Yes.
of times people ask, like, are you going on a vacation this year? Where are you going? Oh, my husband and I, we're going to go here. And you're like, I can't afford a
Yeah, I'm
vacation.
not going anywhere
I mean,
this year.
I'm happy for you that you can, but you don't know my life. And so then when you're like, oh no, I'm not going to vacation. Oh, you should get away. And it's like, I can't afford to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Or there's medical issues or whatever. Like you can't. And that's what I think that kind of drives people apart too, is that measurement of yourself against other people. And that is so easy to do, especially in social media.
Mm-hmm.
It's so easy to look at somebody's life and think that they got it all figured out and they don't. So I think I have to wonder too if it has something to do with that. Like if you work with somebody and you're kind of probably around the same pay level, but their spouse, has a lot of money from their job or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
that's a very different situation. And so maybe you're friends with them on Facebook, which is not always a great thing to be friends with people on Facebook that you work with. But you see pictures and they're like, oh, their house is really nice. And they just got back from this big vacation and whatever. And you're like, I think that can be isolating and make you
Yeah.
lonely too.
Yeah, I think it's
You
the
know,
comparison. I think it's not connecting as much. Like kind of going back to that rule that I said at dinner, like we can talk, how are you feeling at work? I want to hear about that. I want to hear what the problems and challenges are, but I don't want to harp on, anything else. And then to your point, like if you are friends with people, I made a rule at some point that said, okay, if you report me, I will not add to Facebook after, sure, but not during that time because it just gets a little weird. And I'll never
right.
forget this one boss, I will not even name the company, was talking about, this big, huge house on one of the, large team meetings that they were living in. And then in the next year, you go into an office where, you know, everybody's making a lot less than you if you're the, overseer of everything, and then talking about this brand new, whatever, hundred and something $1,000 car. And I was like, you can't do that. You can, but you're making yourself very unrelatable at the same time. And now there's this optic, right? Which is a true optic in corporate. When you think about the higher you go, the more you make, the more it's, someone doing the actual work versus you're overseeing the work and things like that, that separation. And now people just don't feel the relatability, I think, too. So that can make you feel lonely. Like, I have this struggle that I'm going through. I don't want to voice it. I remember when I worked at Golden Lion, the original company, I was in my office. I was the employment supervisor, and I had gone to lunch, and I put my purse, or my little hand thing, in my drawer, and I had the money for the electric in there. I had $100 and something, and someone saw me do it, but I had a door that shut. So I had shut my door, but they were bold enough to go into my office behind my desk, open up where they saw me I don't know how they saw it, Danielle. I couldn't even begin to tell you how they saw it. Took that money and luckily I felt blessed that they dumped my ID and everything else at the plaza, was the hotel, down the street. And I was paranoid. What was I going to do? I didn't have $100 and some extra to pay the electric. And so I'm just sitting in my office with my door shut, crying. Like, I'm just like, what am I going to do? We're not going to have electric. I had all the money. I was supposed to go pay the bill after work. I got the kids and everything else.
Right.
And, I'll never forget that she was my supervisor. She was like, you need to go talk to, his name was Carl. You need to go talk to Carl and tell him what happened. And I'm embarrassed because I'm like, this is all that I have. And he was so empathetic, and he was like, here, take, and I was like, I don't know, well, I'll figure it out, because I don't like accepting things from anybody. That's just the pride, the ego. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want, but
it's just how we were raised.
It
right?
It is. And he gave me that $100 to go pay the electric bill. It was 100 something to go pay it so we could, and I was so grateful. Like, that's the culture. But I've been part of other companies where someone needs help, and you want to help them and raise money as a team. And you're told by the next person up that if you do it for one, you're going to have to do it for all. And like, well, why wouldn't we do it for all? Why are we giving to United Way instead of, which is a great organization, but instead of first our own employees that need help? Like, let's create that culture, right? Like, Sacred Economics is one of the books that I like and I'm reading right now. But how do we create that culture where, you have someone who's working, so we're able to help that person as an organization first before you go outside of the house and help someone you don't even know.
Right.
Like, why is that not a thing?
Organization that has its own infrastructure and hierarchy, and you're going to pay for those salaries and things like that. And yeah, no, it's a good point. And I think, like I remember many years ago, there was a whole thing that was going on. You remember the Red campaign that, like, the Gap and Samsung and all, like, these companies.
Oh, I kind of remember that. Yeah,
Red.
yeah.
And I remember talking to somebody, and all the money was being raised to help people in Africa who were HIV positive. And so, totally good. So much merit to that. Like, great cause. Absolutely. But I just made a comment to somebody of, like, do you know how many people are living with HIV in the United States and don't have access to the prescriptions because they're extremely expensive?
Mm-hmm.
So, like, just keep that in mind. Like, yeah, this is a great cause. I'm not disputing that at all. But, like, there's also stuff here in the United States where we tend to overlook our own, kind of are dismissive of people who are homeless or whatever the case may be. And it's like, looking at, like, I think we often sit in judgment on people. Like, I'll use this example of my dad. So my dad was an only child, and whenever we went somewhere, and I remember, like, an example, like, one time we went to the mall together after school one day, and I think we're going to buy my mom a birthday present or something. And we're walking through the parking lot to go into the mall, and this guy, like, asked him for money, and he stopped and gave him some money. It wasn't a lot. It was maybe a couple bucks, $5, whatever. But we didn't have a lot of money. My parents were always struggling. And so I just remember, like, thinking, like, well, why are you giving that guy money when, when we don't have everything? Like, like, why don't you give that to me kind of thing? And he was like, well, I had it to give and he was there and, hopefully he'll pass it on when he can. Like, it was just a very like selfless sort of
Yeah, if you
reaction.
have enough, right? So what's this
Right.
level of
And it
enough? I
wasn't huge,
feel
like, it
like,
was like $1
yeah,
or
you can
$2. Like, it's
sustain
not
without
gonna,
that dollar. So why not give it to
right.
someone who needs it more is
Yeah.
the, kind of,
Right. Yeah. I mean, it wasn't $100.
yeah.
He asked nicely. He didn't try to harass us or what, you know what I mean? Like, and so I never forgot that. And there's been times where, I didn't have much money, but I saw people, and you see, like, where we live, there's some, people who are always on certain corners. And I know that there's people who make a
Hmm.
job out of that and whatever. But at the same time, it's like, I don't know what they're going through. They don't know what I'm going through.
Yeah.
And so, if there's times when I can afford to give a little or donate to something and I'm okay with it. But I think too, people tend to, we have overexposure of that. Like, you open an app, and there's like, hey, can you donate to this? You can donate to that or whatever. And you do get you can get little, it can be exhausting,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
there's always stuff going on. Right now, everybody's asking for help for the fires in Los Angeles and those
Hmm.
people. And,
Well, then we just
there's,
got done with North
yeah,
Carolina and then Florida. And,
yeah,
when you think about the snowball of events and things like that, which
sure.
they're all very sad, but how can I help the individual is always my thought. Like, how can I help the individual that I know that needs it? And then kind of going back to that culture of, at Golden
Know
Lion,
how
I almost said Golden Lion.
it
But so, going back there, I'm saying nothing but good things about them. But going back to that, we had an employee relief fund in part of our paycheck. And like I said, I mean, that $100 was the world to me. And, I didn't have it to pay the electric bill and things like that. But we had an employee relief fund where you could, like, if you were going through something like that, and they could have sent me to that to say, we'll get you the money, go through employee. But, Carl he had an amazing
right.
heart, was like, here's the money you need to do it. But we were able as employees, instead of giving to some of the other organizations that are out there, to give to that employee relief fund. And then we got a report. We knew who we helped. Like, it didn't say the name, things like that. And it was all kept very confidential with HR. But at the same time, we knew we helped someone who retained their home. We helped someone do those things who are working with us single day. And I always thought that was the coolest thing. And I never understood why so
Amazing.
many more companies don't do that, right? Like the Amazons of the world. Maybe they do. I don't know. Maybe they do have an employee relief fund. But like, I know there's other organizations I've been a part of and companies that have not done it. And they have the people who would absolutely give, but I don't know if people are thinking in that way and
Well, if you
creating
think
that
about
kind of culture, you know?
you have 100 employees, let's just say, and each person gave $10 a pay period, and you have 26 pay periods a week. Like, that adds up. And if every single person did that, you would be set up for success in
Hmm.
terms of like having one that was really helping people. And then if you had put in a lot, and maybe you can make it so that somebody could pay it back if they wanted to, or they could, and all those types of things, that the companies should do that. I don't know why they don't. Maybe it's nobody's thought of it. But I feel like there's so many people who could benefit from something like that.
Right?
And
Yeah.
like, your car broke down and you don't have, cars are expensive to fix
Hmm.
nowadays. Like, maybe it's going to be $1,500 to get your car, but I can't even get into the office because I don't have the money. Like, that would be a really great way to, help somebody out or whatever. Yeah. I don't know. I think we have to start looking at culture differently in terms of who we are as people
Yeah.
and what we bring to the table. And not that we look like each other or that we all went to the same school or we go to the same churches or like the same type of food or watch the same television shows. I feel like culture has kind of gotten down to like those types of things. Like, do you
Yeah,
watch
and they
The
make it like,
Bachelor?
oh, this music is a certain culture, this is a certain, but that's not it. Like, culture
No.
is, to me, like when I think about what we've talked about in this conversation, is it starts with trust. How do you drive results and support each other, right? Culture of question, doing those types of things. And then how do you support each other as an organization? How do you take care of the people within your organization? To me, that's culture. Like, every business has to make really hard decisions. You have to lay people off because you just don't have the business. You have to And that is an understanding that people should have based on, what's happening within the business. Hey, this is what's going to, but you're transparent with that, right? And it's
Right.
not some of the cultures that have come and said, I'm going to cut this so I can move this here and save X, Y, Z. But it's, really trusting the organization. And if you are shifting and you're saying, here's the ways that we found efficiency and this does impact 10% of jobs or whatever, that's an apparent thing. And then you help those people find other jobs. I feel like there's such a better way to do things than we're doing it. It's just like,
Yeah, that's true.
how do you also
Yeah,
support people that
because I
have
think also
supported you?
when you worked at a company and you're laid off nowadays, nobody's coming to you 2 weeks in advance and saying, we're going to be doing this. If you want to stay through the 2 weeks, this is what your severance package is, whatever. And actually treating them like humans.
Yeah.
I think people would be okay with that. I mean, some people still wouldn't, but you would be giving them some autonomy.
Mm-hmm.
No, I'm just going to now, or no, I'm going to stay. I want to finish out my time and whatever. Because I think then people feel like a commodity.
Yeah.
Like you just cut me off. And especially when you are, you're given, suddenly there's a meeting put on your calendar that you didn't expect with your boss and you join and you're like, oh, I know what this is.
Yeah.
And
It's Friday at 3 p.m. There's
right.
only,
And
I'm already working here, so I know there's probably one result.
right. And so, and then they don't tell anybody. I know, I remember that at the last company was you'd hear through the winds, somebody was gone or
Yeah.
you try to email somebody and you wouldn't even get a bounce back. You just never hear from that person again. And
Someone else is checking their email. They just took over the email box, so it's like the
right.
person's still there, but they're
They
not.
didn't
They're
have
not telling
time
anyone.
to put an out of office. Sometimes, they might have enough time to put an out of office, but most of the time they didn't. And then you hear secondhand that somebody's gone and you don't know, did they quit? Did they get fired? Did they get laid off? What is the situation? So I think that then creates that distrust with your colleagues because you're like, did they know that I was going to be let go? Did they know it was going to happen? Why didn't they reach out to me when they found out, just to say, hey, I really enjoyed working with you. Take care of yourself, blah, blah, blah. I was on LinkedIn yesterday and I saw somebody that we used to work with was leaving the company. And she'd been there a few years. And she posted this on LinkedIn that she was wrapping up her time there. It was, end of the week. And I kept thinking to myself, I guess she's going somewhere else because I've never seen anybody sort of announce this if they were being laid off.
Mm-hmm.
But I have seen that when they were given time to prepare. And
I'm excited for my next adventure type thing.
Right, right.
So they're going somewhere versus, yeah.
Right. And so all these people are commenting saying, congratulations, or I loved working with you. You're going to do great. Stay in touch, all that kind of stuff, which is totally appropriate, right? We've all been there. But at the same time, when you are let go, maybe it's part of a big wave of layoffs. Maybe it's not. And
Or
you're
people
sort
are
of
not sure the why, Danielle. So I think the other
right.
piece of that is they're not sure why. Like when I asked for a package. So there were just a few people that reached out to me, but I wonder if they're thinking, well, was she let go? You know what I mean? And then,
Right.
we
This
communicate,
sort of spin of
it's a weird place to be. You know what I mean?
So I feel like that also contributes to the feeling of distrust.
Yes.
Because once you have that happen to you and then you go to another company, you're kind of always on guard of oh, that could happen here. Or you see it happen to other people and you're like, did they know, what? So I've always tried to make an effort when I hear people are, when they've given notice, definitely reach out. Or when I know that their job's being eliminated and maybe they have some time or maybe they don't have time and you just found out after the fact, to reach out and just be like, hey, let me know if you need anything. I, really enjoyed working with you. Maybe even if you didn't, just still say hello because you're a human and you should be able to, to be nice.
Yeah, it was like good riddance,
Right.
You know what I
And
mean? What was
had
this
that
friend?
experience
And
with
then
people where I'm
maybe
oh,
you do start to heal yourself back when you go to the next place. And then I think some of the loneliness is probably self-inflicted loneliness at the same time. Just like you
We've all been
want to
through
keep to
stuff. We've
yourself and you
all
don't build relationships. So now you're even more lonely. Like, yeah.
right. Because there's very few places now where people are working for long periods of time. And the ones that we know of, they're probably the most ruthless. The people who are there are the most ruthless in terms
Yes.
of they're going to show you who they are or who they want you to think they are. And they're not going to hold anything back about everybody else. They're going to be, you know, saying stuff about other people. They're going to be, I mean, not everybody, but I've seen this.
Yeah.
And going to be more like, well, it's just business. It's like, well, no, it's not just business. This is somebody's livelihood. This is somebody's ego,
Mm-hmm.
and they have to think, was I just let go because I made too much money? And then that creates a level of fear for the next role and thinking, should I be taking less money?
Yeah.
There's so many, it's so complicated. And I think that's part of it. It's just that people are fearful. They don't trust other people because they don't know if people have their best intentions at heart. It's just it's complicated.
It is.
And
And, then you have those sites I mentioned. I'm not going to say the name because people go to it and everything else, but, where they are confidential and people can talk about other people, especially in leadership. I remember, I know exactly when my name hit this list. It was like, oh, what about that new person, this chief recruiting officer, Jennifer, and my old name was spelled correctly. We think she's shady. And I know there was only two people who used the word shady in there, and it was after this meeting. Anyways, it's the whole thing. But I think that also creates this this loneliness, right? To say like, gosh, are people really thinking that? Like, especially, if you're in, not only if you're doing the work and things like that, or if you're in leadership, like there's actual platforms where people can go and talk smack about you. Like, and all you're trying to do is your best, right? And what you have, and not everyone's going to like you. And I'm okay with that now. Say what you will. It doesn't bother me anymore. Like it did, but I figured out
yeah,
I could never please everyone. As long as I can make a difference in most people's lives and they thought I was a good leader, I'm good. That 5-10%, you have
right,
to just kind of let that go. But I think that also does attribute to that, that loneliness and that, now in my next place, or, are you still going to be that authentic person when people maybe viewed you that way? But it's a super small percent, right? When you start to think about it. So I think there's so
right,
many, to your point, so complex, and there's so many dynamics that come into culture and what you allow and what's allowed and how you support each other. But it's the most important thing when you go to an organization is how do they operate? What's their culture?
hmm
How
yeah, but
many?
it's not that definable,
No,
you
it's
know,
not.
because we're still humans, we're still people, we're still going to make bad decisions, we're still going to say things that maybe are rude, even if it's unintentional, that, but I think you have to try to be transparent. You have to try to be the best version of you as much as you can, support your colleagues, do your part of the work, your share of it, show up every day. And not just that you're showing up to work, but like showing up in meetings and participating and all
Yeah.
those things. And that's really because, everybody's worked with someone who are like, oh, there's, Joe or whatever his name is, and he's just, totally checked out, or so and so who's gonna talk about what like there's just and then that kind of creates that whole like sniping and just that negative vibe of
Yeah.
and that's not fun.
Yeah.
Oh, it's gonna be fun to talk about people, but like, oh, did you see they did this again? You know what I
I
mean?
never say anything that I wouldn't say to somebody. So if I have that sentiment, you know what I mean? I will always say it
Right?
to them or whatever. But I try not to, you know what I mean? But you always have like, I had this really bad experience. And then when someone experiences it too, you're like, oh, it wasn't just me. Like you feel better. Like it's trauma bonding. Like you do some trauma bonding at work too.
Right.
So like you have to just show up as you, do the best you can. I did read a post too, and I think we touched on this one that said, and it was from someone who was maybe, I think, a millennial. They were younger than us, that's for sure. But it said you can't show up as your authentic self because then you'll be kind of pushed out. So to an extent, and you have to learn that balance too. But I feel like if you're a supportive culture, that individualism in who you are, as long as you're being respectful, you know what I mean? You're not flying off the cuff and you're not saying things crazy. So there's a limit to everything. So I will say that it's not limitless, but being able to say, hey, I'm human. This is what's going on. Interacting with people, they get to know you, you get to know them. That should be a thing, I feel like. And there's a lot of places where you have to really, I'm going to call it shave yourself because I don't know another word to say, but you have to shave yourself, right? Like your personality. You said that I know what's going through your mind right now, Danielle.
I don't need to know about this.
So, you know what I mean? Like I couldn't think of a word to say,
you
but
have
that's
to
just
kind of,
you're like,
you
it's
kind
just
of have
like
to
this,
mold
these
yourself
pieces of
into
you know?
you have to kind of mold yourself
Yeah.
or, show only certain sides or something. Because I think people are worried that if they show too much or they show the wrong thing, people are going to judge them. And I think there is a lot of that. And I think maybe we see it more than ever now because of social media and how things are spun or shown and everything. And it's like that, years ago, I would work with people and the only time I ever interacted with them was, at work. I didn't know their house. I didn't know where they lived. I didn't talk to them on the phone.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't. So you know them as that. And I think now that line is so blurred that if you're friends with them on Facebook, if you're friends with them or you follow them on Instagram or whatever, you see all this other stuff. And it's like, I don't, and that was one of the reasons why I kind of walked away from social media for a long time was like, I don't really want to know what's going on inside everybody's brain at every moment.
Sometimes I do. Like it's so crazy out there.
I don't need to know. I don't, I lost respect for some people because of things that they
I get
said.
that. Sometimes you're like, this is really,
And so I don't really
I get that.
add
I don't want to
people
see that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And so now like when it comes to Facebook or whatever, I only follow certain people. Sometimes I'll see posts and then I'll start to comment and then I just back that comment out and I step away. I'm like, I don't need this. I don't need to put this out there. I don't want to. So there's, and I'm sort of self filtering. But at the same time, I think it just speaks to 20 years ago, this wouldn't have been a thing. I wouldn't
Right.
have been able to, I
Not at
wouldn't have
all.
known a person or whatever. And so I think that's just, we have to be a little more selective in that way.
Self-filtering. That's what I meant by shaving.
Self-filtering.
Danielle. That's a way better word. Self-filtering than by shaving.
Self-filtering. Yeah. Because I think people filter themselves in a way that they think, oh, I'm going to present this mask to the world.
Yeah.
And then when their mask slips,
so many
and they
people
can't
have masks.
keep it up.
Especially on social media. So that's also why you can't go by what people say or what they do because you don't know what's happening behind the scenes because no one's posting and no one also wants to hear, all the blah stuff. Be real, be vulnerable, be you. You know what I mean? So I think there's a lot of self-filtering that happens.
Sometimes people treat social media like it's their personal blog.
Yeah, dear diary.
No, if you want to have a blog, go start a blog. Or go to a blog or whatever, and I can choose to follow you or not.
I have a blog and Facebook, so, I do just share my poetry and all.
Well, yeah, but but my point is like a lot of times people will just jump on Facebook and they're like, so today I did and it's like, why do I need to know this?
Yeah.
Why don't,
instead
of making it like short and sweet or like a pithy comment about whatever.
I can't read really long stuff. I'm bad.
Too long, didn't read. I can't, I can't engage with that.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. So sometimes I want to post the meals that I make, because I, make some pretty good stuff. Or like I get on these kicks and I'm like, oh, I should post this. Which I was like, no one wants to see what we eat. I was like, maybe some people do. No. You don't know.
Yeah. Oh, I know.
Fine, I won't do it.
For a long time, I had this app on my phone that you could connect all your social media sites to.
Mm-hmm.
And then it would tell you on this day of other years, like stuff that you posted.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I finally just had to delete it because I'm like, this is so embarrassing. I don't want to.
You don't want to relive it?
Things. It's not like I was posting things that are like literally, embarrassing about myself, but embarrassing in that, why was I sharing this?
Right.
This is so, this is everything I hate about social media, and here I am contributing to that.
There was a learning curve. He had to go through the learning curve.
Right. Right. And so I'm just like, so I deleted that a long time ago and I stopped looking at that because I don't need to I mean, and I told somebody that once, and they were like, "Oh yeah, every time I see that, I just go back online and I delete that old
Really,
post."
I
And I'm like,
leave
"I'm
it.
not
If
gonna,
I said it, I said what I
I'm not
said,
gonna
you
do
know?
all that." But it's who I was then, and I'm not that person anymore, and I would never post that now.
My posts that come up, Danielle, are the ones where I was really into fitness. I need to get back there. But sometimes I'm like, get a life, Jennifer. You should have been doing something.
Right. And that's the thing, sort of like, and I think that there's this thing with like virtue signaling where people like to, oh yeah, I did work out, or look at how clean and healthy I'm eating. And there could be like a bag of Oreos on the other side of that screen, or maybe they
That's
just
me
put the
now.
clothes on and took a picture. Yeah, maybe they just took the picture, they put the clothes on and took the picture, and they're not actually working out, or and who cares? Like, why are you even
Sometimes I
posting?
see it though, and I'm like, I need to do better. I really need to do better. I'm gonna get there. I'm gonna
Right.
mental note to do a little bit better. I'm gonna get healthy.
Right.
Or,
And
like
that's
I
fine.
should
And
go for a
that's
walk,
how
or
it
I
should,
should,
but you
like
don't have to tell
sometimes.
the whole world,
Yeah.
And I think, and there's that virtue signaling where people are like, oh, today I was da da da, and I saw this person and I helped them do this. Like, keep that to yourself. You do not need to tell the world, because you're just trying to get people to tell you what a great person you are.
True. Like, I
And,
don't like when
you
someone says
know,
I gave someone this, or I like, I mean, great. If you're
right,
going to do it, you do it, and you do it in silence, I feel like. But
right,
there's a lot of
you,
people who do
right,
kind of
you do,
say,
because,
like, oh, I've given whatever, but then it's
yeah,
a
like,
special
look at me,
occasion
I'm
for you,
a
you
great
know?
person.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, and great. I'm glad that you gave. I think that's awesome. Congratulations. But why are you telling people
Yeah.
that? Are you saying because you want other people to do it? Are you sharing, like, okay, so maybe if you say, "Hey, I found out about this situation. I want to help this family out. I know them, or I don't know them, or whatever," and you want to share that and encourage people to donate or whatever, fine. But like, don't, yeah, I don't know. So I think it's just,
Oh, what about the
I go,
Starbucks line? How do you feel about that? Have you ever been in line where someone starts
oh, the
trying
pay
the
it
coffee for
forward.
the person
I
behind
don't
them?
like it.
And then I'm
I
the
don't like it.
person that when they get to me, it's like the person behind you has an order of $30.55. We're doing it. No, I'm good. I can't spend that on the person behind me. Like, yeah, yeah. I'm always that person. Like at the end, if I could do it, I'll do it. But on the Starbucks thing, but if it's
Oh
a
yeah, the
crazy
Starbucks.
order, I can't do it. And if you can't afford it, don't feel bad about ending it.
Yeah, because I would feel
Sorry.
bad. I mean, if people who donated to me and paid for my drinks or whatever, I would, and maybe it was like a big order. And so if the person behind you, you feel like, oh, well, that's cheaper than what I was getting or whatever.
Mhm.
But, I would rather than in turn say, give the money to the baristas,
Yeah.
put it in their tip jar. Like, oh, I was going to spend
That's a good idea.
$30,
I didn't even think about that. To say like, you know, I'll give you
but I
the
don't know if you
whatever it
pass
is I was gonna
back.
pay. Like after your order, because well, I always order on my app though. So I think a lot of people are doing that.
Right.
So it used to be a thing, and I don't think it's as much of a thing now because like I always
Probably
order with
not.
my app and it's
Yeah,
paid
like
for. Yeah.
because usually I do mobile order too.
The other
You
thing
know.
I was thinking about when we were talking about filtering yourself, and then we were talking about culture was the work voice versus the non-work voice, which my voice is the same
Oh yeah.
now. But I think when I was like first in my career, I did have a customer service voice versus the my at-home voice. Do you have that or did you have that? Because I've always feel like I've known
I
you with
don't
one voice.
know. I think, I mean, Kevin has commented like, I can tell when you're talking to Jennifer, or I can tell when you're talking to like somebody that but I think it has more to do with my cadence and
Mm.
that word choices I have, that it's not as relaxed if I'm talking to like a vendor or something like that, that it might not. But I think I've tried really hard to just sort of be who I am
Yeah.
in a work situation. Because I remember years ago when we were at Orbital, and there was somebody there who I'd known for years outside of a work situation. And I would hear them talking to other people, and I'm like, who is that? That is not that. Like, I've known you like a long time, and I know that is not who you are.
Yeah.
And that's weird. And so I think that's when it made me aware of that.
Mm-hmm.
People do kind of put on their work their work, not attire, but like they put on a facade. And it's like, that's exhausting
Yeah.
if you want to have put on a facade. Sure, if you need to put on your work voice because you have to say a certain thing or you have to present in a certain way. But yeah, to have to do that all the time and not be your authentic self would be exhausting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think like you, like it's cadence. Like they can tell now if it's like the cadence of in the type of conversation. If I'm
Right.
more
Yeah.
engaged, like I'm going back and forth, or I'm in listening mode, or I feel like that's the difference now versus, I was, I had to get out of the Jenny back then. To come
Right.
into
Right. Well, and
playing
when
up
you
all of the things together. But, you do have like, I think, especially when you're transitioning into your career, like, I feel like
yeah,
that's a
'cause when
thing.
you're
That's a real
younger,
thing.
yeah, because when you're younger, you're gonna say things differently, or you're gonna talk differently, or whatever. And yeah, I think that has a lot to do with it. But the point I was making about the person who I'd known for years, I remember distinctly, like, it was the tone of the voice, it was like the pitch, and I remember looking at them, and their body language was really
Hmm.
different too. It was just very contrived, I
Yeah, for me,
guess.
it's almost like the switch that I can relate it to is the Ariana Grande switch, where she says she does it to protect her vocal cords, that really high pitched voice, like the real girly, like Candy. I call it Candy. That's what that voice sounds like versus her
Right.
regular everyday voice that she was
Speaking.
using before. To me, that's really polar. Not that she is like. Well, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying the difference in voice is very opposite of one versus the other, and I've seen people do that.
Right. Yeah. And I think that it's, well, and maybe, and sometimes, like, if you're hanging out with people you've known a long time and
Mhm.
kind of have a rhythm to how you're speaking, I think that can happen too naturally, like in a family situation or people you've been friends with for a long time, you kind of end up talking a certain way. If that, but that's sort of indicative of that particular situation, not every situation.
Yeah.
So I'm really bad at like picking up accent when I'm talking to people. If I'm talking to someone who's from the South, I'll start to sound a little Southern. And I don't mean to, but or I'll do it with like an English accent, and I have to, what am I doing? It's just because I'm really listening to, and I kind of pick up on that tone and stuff.
All of a sudden, Danielle's like, "Cheerio,
You
my
know,
good friend."
and I can just sort of say, yeah, it is what it is.
It is. All right. Do you want to stop there?
Yeah, I think that's good.
All right. So like, comment, share, subscribe. We're on all your favorite listening channels: YouTube, Spotify, iHeart. You can also buy us a cup of coffee. There's a link below. Anything else, Danielle, that I missed?
I think that's it.
All
And
right.
yeah, definitely let us know what you like, what you don't like. Well, you've got tough skin, so
That's right. All right. Until next time.
bye.